No more baseball cards. No more baseball cards. I bought more baseball cards, but no more videos about baseball cards. So welcome back. We're going to continue the Winter in Review series where I talk about games that I've gotten over the past couple months. I might have binged just a little bit during the holiday season, and now it's February. But it's fine. We're just catching up on stuff to talk about. And I was looking through the games that I had to talk about, at least for this time era, and I realized that a bunch of them were actually Japanese DS games. So this episode can also double as a Nihon no Konyo Henshokai episode. That's cool. We got some more games to talk about in that series, more DS games, which might come soon. But I figured I'd talk about these for now, and we'll get to all that other stuff when we get back to it. There's still like 400 games in that backlog that I needed to talk about from like over a year ago, but that's okay. That's a problem for a different day. Anyway, so we'll dive right into it. And why not? Let's start with just a weird little set of games. 3 games released in this series, and I now have all 3 of them. So let's yeah. First one is Kabushiki Bye Bye Trainer Kabutore, which is a December 2006 stock market simulation game. You heard me right. And it's also not like where the weirdness ends. There's a lot of weird going on here. It's developed by Winkysoft and published by Konami. So first thing weird there is that Konami, why are they publishing a stock market simulation game? I don't know. I think that's really funny though. But the developer, Winkysoft, has actually worked with Konami before because they developed the Yu-Gi-Oh! Capsule Monster Coliseum games that I talked about not that long ago, at least in an episode not super long ago, and then another episode a little while ago. But we've heard of Winkysoft before, which is pretty cool. And, just as some background, the DS was very known for being all-encompassing for, like, all ages, right? There was games that were perfect for very small children, and there were cartridges that were good for even the grandparents. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure they put public domain books onto a cartridge, and then you could just be like, here, Grandpa, go read. I don't know many people that actually did that, but that was there. So you would think that, like, stock market simulation game, perfect, totally adult-centric, definitely, in Japan, made for adults so that they can learn about the stock market. Maybe they wanted to get into it, and I like that idea, except I think you're wrong in that this game is totally cartoonish and totally child-centric. So I think, even with a tutorial in the beginning, I think they're trying to teach kids in Japan how to do the stock market, which is both like really funny and also kind of weird, but also still really funny. So that's a weird kind of release to begin with. But even weirder is that there's a whole series of these games. The next one had the same developer, same publisher, but was released only 11 months later, December 2006 to November 2007. Just not even a year later. They couldn't even wait a whole year. And this is Kabushiki Bye Bye Trainer Kabutore Next. I don't know if you could see the hologram in there, but it says Next underneath it. Also kind of funny. Everything else is in Japanese, and then we have one word in English. I don't know. Kind of funny. But it's just a sequel to the previous game. So this stuff keeps existing, but there was one more game in the series. I have all 3 of these games in the series, but the last one is Gaitame Bye Bye Trainer Kabutore FX. So a little bit more to talk about here. So this time, at least they waited over a year. It took a year and 4 months for this one to come out in March 2009, at least from the last one. But this one wasn't developed by Winkysoft. This one was actually developed by Kojima Productions, which, if you're not familiar, is the production company, game studio of Hideo Kojima, who is also the creator of Metal Gear. Okay, so first of all, it's kind of weird that Kojima Productions, like this, legendary game developer, worked on a stock market game, but not even the first stock market game. Also, like the 3rd game in the series, which is just kind of funny. But it's also not the first time that like a legendary Japanese developer has worked on like games that are totally unrelated to like what their like bread and butter was. So again, Kojima Productions, Metal Gear, making a stock market game. But for example, like Shigesato Itoi, the creator of the Mother and Earthbound series, he has released 2 fishing games. I think they're kind of like similar games, just released on different systems, but like still kind of funny that it's like totally different and opposite of what what they're known for. So that's kind of funny. Also, I'm just looking in the corner now. I see iHeart FX. So I wonder if that's something specific. But yeah, I don't know how you could find a weirder trio of games that never left Japan, but there we go. So we don't have to be so weird anymore. But let's move on to the next game. Next one is Magic Taizen, which was released in November 2006, and it is, almost as it sounds, a magic teaching game developed by Aiding. Aiding is responsible for a handful of anime games. They did some games out of Bleach, out of Naruto, after Hunter x Hunter. Also did some stuff on Kamen Rider, which I think Kamen Rider is a lot more popular in Japan. I don't think it's ever come here. But also they did Pikmin 3 Deluxe on Switch. So another one, kind of like where did this developer come from for this game, which is kind of cool. But it's published by Nintendo. So it was brought to America a year later in November 2007 as Master of Illusion. So originally in Japan, came to North America, and like I said, as it sounds, it's a teaching game. So this is actually my third copy of this game. Hear me out. So when I first started collecting Japanese games, I was just buying games in lots. One specific seller I had, it was great, and they had a small box version of this game. So this is a big box version. We're going to get into that, but there was a small box version of this game, or at least the small box just taken out of the big box, and I got that in a lot, so I had it. Okay, cool. And then either it was in another lot, or I just happened to come across the big box version in one way or another. I'm pretty sure it was just in another lot, but then in another lot, I got the big box version of the game. So it had the big box cover with just the small game inside. And so then I traded in my loose copy and then had the big box copy with the small box in the inside. And then you're probably wondering, well, why is there a big box? Well, I didn't find out until afterwards that the big box, it was it was released in a big box because it came with a deck of cards. So finally, on my third copy of the game, I went out and bought a copy of this that actually has the deck of cards on the inside. The deck is like pristine, but it's also really cool because the deck of cards has Nintendo written on it, like right in the middle, which is pretty cool. Nice little homage to like Nintendo, their roots as like Hanafuda cards. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, it took me 3 copies for me to get an actual complete copy of this, which is pretty cool. But yeah, I don't know what else to say about it except that it's trying to teach you magic. But also it's very interesting that each individual trick, so there's like a collection of tricks here, but Nintendo then published each individual trick on the DSi eShop, DSiWare, but basically on the DSi eShop. So you could buy just the single tricks to learn. And then not only could you buy the single tricks that were included in the game, you could also buy new tricks that were developed and published specifically for DSiWare. So, yeah, kind of funny. This kind of thing wouldn't exist now. It definitely should because it's really cool, but, like, I don't know what the quality of this was. It was probably pretty bad, but, yeah, kind of interesting. Magic teaching game published by Nintendo and, stock market games published by Konami and one developed by Kojima. So, I don't know. It's kind of weird. Some funny games here. Next one, not as weird. I keep saying not as weird. This one's actually not weird, but this is Mario Basket 3-on-3, or better known as Mario Hoops 3-on-3 in North America. So it was originally released in Japan in July 2006, and then came to North America just 2 months later in September 2006. And it's the first... Oh, okay, let me backtrack. It's obviously published by Nintendo as a Mario game, but it's developed by Square Enix. So Square Enix, very, very famous for Final Fantasy, but it's also the first Mario game by Square Enix since Super Mario RPG, a whopping like 10 years earlier. So pretty cool. Another chance. I don't know why that other chance came as a basketball game, but it did. And it's also not the first time that Mario has appeared in a basketball game. Mario Hoops 3-on-3. It's a basketball game, right? But the first time Mario appeared in a basketball game was actually in NBA Street 3 on GameCube. I'm pretty sure NBA Street was on multiple systems, but the GameCube version had Mario in it, which is pretty cool. And also, I mentioned that Square Enix developed this. So Final Fantasy characters also appear in this game, which is a nice little crossover, kind of interesting. I think Mario Basketball would appear one more time on Mario Sports Mix on Wii like 4 years later, but I'm pretty sure that's it for basketball. Not that I have a great history with basketball. I did 1 year of basketball when I was growing up, and the coach, I won't go into it because it's not the place for it, but like it was a horrible experience. So even though I'm like kind of a tall-ish guy, yeah, that didn't last. So yeah, I don't really have much for basketball, but it's a Mario basketball game. I have bad collecting habits. I actually had this game in English, in English, and then I was like, this is redundant in my collection, so I sold it. But I was like, this is a game that I would at least want in like Japanese just for the shelf. So there we go. And the game also was re-released on the Wii U Virtual Console in May 2016 everywhere except North America. And then it took another 6 months for it to come to the Wii U eShop in North America, which is just kind of weird. Europe also had this game as Mario Slam Basketball, which is like also a super awesome name. Mario Hoops 3-on-3 in America, Mario Basket 3-on-3 in Japan, and Mario Slam Basketball in Europe is like, that's a great trio of names. Mario Basket is probably the worst of the three, but like, it's still a pretty sick name in my opinion. So, that was cool. So the next one is, it's actually 2 games, which I didn't realize it was going to be 2 games until I was doing research for this video. But here we go. So, the DS portion of this, right, it's a DS episode. So, it is Fushigi no Dungeon, Furai no Shiren, DS2. Sabaku no Majo. Okay, hear me out. But this is actually a remake of a Game Boy Color game with the exact same title, except it is Fushigi no Dungeon Furai no Shiren GB2 instead of DS2. Sabaku no Majo. Okay, so that translates to Shiren the Wanderer, Magic Castle of the Desert. So we've talked about Shiren the Wanderer before. I just think it's kind of an interesting, quirky series with a really neat history with some roots that we'll talk about in just a second. But this game completely stuck in Japan. Handful of Shiren the Wanderer games have made it out of Japan. This one completely stuck in Japan, which kind of stinks. It was originally released on Game Boy Color in July 2001, and then it was remade for the DS in November 2008. So I had bought this DS version not that long ago, and then when I was doing research, I was like, wait a second, it's a remake of a game I also needed to talk about. So we're just putting both games in the episode. So both versions were developed by Chunsoft, but the Game Boy Color version in 2001 was also published by Chunsoft, but at some point between 2001 and 2008, Sega ended up taking over, does it say Sega? Yeah, Sega ended up taking over the publishing duties for the Shiren the Wanderer games, which is kind of interesting. So even though it's the same game, remade by the same team, or I should say same developer, I don't know if it was the exact same team, but yeah, kind of funny to see the same game just published by 2 different publishers. And like I said, we've talked about this series a couple times. I just think, even though I will never play a roguelike, which is the entire series, I just think it's kind of fascinating. I don't know, I think Shiren the Wanderer is also just an awesome name. But it's Shiren the Wanderer is part of the overarching Mystery Dungeon series, the Fushigi no Dungeon part. But in North America, it's known as Mystery Dungeon. So we have a handful of Shiren the Wanderer games known under this like Mystery Dungeon title. And it started, the original Mystery Dungeon was a Dragon Quest spinoff, I'm pretty sure. So like that's kind of interesting. But then the game type, I should say, the series has branched out a lot into a bunch of different crossovers, most notably the Pokemon Mystery Dungeon series, which is literally made in tandem or / inspired by the Shiren the Wanderer games. So that's pretty cool. Neat history, neat series. I just like collecting the games for this series for no super apparent reason. But yeah, this is super cool. It's even cool to get both games without even knowing that I did. There's some really expensive Shiren the Wanderer games in Japanese. In North America, they're not super expensive, but for example, there's like a Dreamcast Shiren the Wanderer that's like crazy expensive. So I would like to get them all at some point, but one bad habit at a time. So, but last but not least, speaking of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, speaking of Pokemon in general, this is Pocket Monsters Platinum, or just better known as Pokemon Platinum. So this game doesn't really need an introduction. Pokemon doesn't need an introduction, but Diamond and Pearl, Pokemon Diamond and Pearl were originally released as the first mainline Pokemon games on DS in Japan in September 2006, and then a couple months later in North America in April 2007. Pokemon Platinum is an enhanced version of Diamond and Pearl. So this was released in September 2008, so almost I'll say a year and a half after Diamond and Pearl came to North America, and then it would end up coming to North America in March 2009. So a couple of years gaps. But this third version, this enhanced third version thing that Pokemon did was very common at the time. So for example, if you played Pokemon Yellow, that's the enhanced version of Red and Blue. If you played Pokemon Crystal, that's the enhanced version of Gold and Silver. If you played Pokemon Emerald, that's the enhanced version of Ruby and Sapphire. So this is just the same thing, but for Gen 4 Pokemon. So fix some balancing errors. Like a most infamous thing is like there's no fire types in the region. So like if you don't choose Infernape, you have to get a Rapidash on your team basically. So fix some balancing there. I know, for example, like Houndour. I say Houndour. I don't know. Houndour and Houndoom are now like earlier in the game, so you can get more than two like lines of fire types. Made more Pokemon available just in general, so kind of working through some memory storage, right? You can I don't know. Things were what's the word I'm looking for? Oh geez, polished enough that they could include more Pokemon. And also they added some new story to the game. Not a ton, but the big change is that this entire game is revolved around Giratina. Wow, I'm realizing the first time that I'm saying these names out loud, I don't really know how to say them. But the whole game revolves around Giratina, where the previous games are revolved around Dialga and Palkia. So this game, you're searching for Dialga, and you get into the Distortion World, which was like, I've talked about it in Pokemon Black and White that those games are just so beautiful on DS, and I think the Distortion World was like the lead into that, because the Distortion World is fantastic. It blows anything Pokemon had done out of the water at the time, so that's pretty cool. I didn't play Pokemon Platinum growing up, but the first time I played it as an adult, I loved it. It's a good experience, but like the Distortion World, I was like, I don't know how to traverse this. I need a guide, but like it is awesome. It is beautiful. It is incredibly well made. So that's pretty cool. Pokemon would end up doing this a couple more times with enhanced versions, except in Gen 5 they stopped doing just one enhanced version and then it did two more. Black and White became Black 2 and White 2, so a little extra money there. Sun and Moon would become Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. I think Gen 6? Skips over that? I don't know. But then that kind of stopped. So with Sword and Shield, instead of doing a third version, they did DLC. Scarlet and Violet, they just did DLC, and I don't think we'll ever see a third version again. We'll of course see things like Pokemon Legends ZA, which is kind of different, kind of like spin-off-esque, but I don't think we'll ever see third version of these games again, as opposed to just doing DLC. Can't blame them. It's money. It's a Pokemon game, so I bought it, but also this is just the definitive Gen 4 experience. And now I'm only missing one more mainline Pokemon game outside of the Switch, at least in Japanese. English, I have all of them, but in Japanese, I'm missing Pokemon Soul Silver. I'm pretty sure is like the last one, and then just all the Switch games in Japanese for Pokemon. So we'll get around to that at some point. It's in my watch list, but for later. So that's everything I have in this episode. So kind of quick. I don't know, kind of just funny things to talk about. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something. If there's anything that I got wrong or that I missed about these games, please let me know. I would love to continue learning about these games as much as I have hopefully taught you something. So, with that said, bye.